At least 16 people have been killed in Israeli missile strikes in central Syria. The news being broadcast by local media Sanaa State News Agency. They say the airstrikes targeted a number of military sites in the central part of the country. The attack, which happened on Sunday night, also sparked a fire that caused material damage near the city of Masyaf in the Hama province, injuring at least 43 people. The Syrian military says its air defense systems confronted the aggression's missiles and shot down some of them without providing further information. However, the Israeli military says it would not comment on foreign media reports of the strikes, but the IDF has previously acknowledged carrying out hundreds of strikes in recent years on targets in Syria that it says are linked to Iran. Well, the attacks in Syria come just hours after a gunman opened fire on Israelis in the West Bank, killing 3 of them on Sunday. Israeli officials have confirmed the deaths. The gunman had approached the Allenby Bridge crossing from the Jordanian side in a truck, then got out and opened fire. We'll have more on that later. In the meantime, the United Nations is calling for an end to the war in Gaza, emphasizing urgent action is needed in order to avert a full-blown regional crisis. This was relayed by the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, during a Security Council meeting in Geneva. Turk calls on countries to take steps in what he calls Israel's blatant disregard for international law. So far, the war in Gaza has killed more than 40,000 people. It's also displaced 1.9 million Palestinians from their homes.
Ending the war and averting a full-blown regional conflict is an absolute and urgent priority. Equally, the wider situation of illegality across the occupied Palestinian territory, deriving from Israel's policies and practices, as so clearly spelled out by the International Court of Justice in its advisory opinion in July, must be comprehensively addressed. States must not and cannot accept blatant disregard for international law, including binding decisions of the Security Council and orders of the International Court of Justice, neither in this nor any other situation. We know that wars spill over and into future generations, fostering repeated cycles of hatred if their causes remain unaddressed. Sadly, the war in Gaza is the quintessential example. Since the horrific 7 October attacks claimed the lives of over 1,200 victims in Israel and injured many others, over 40,000 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces, several thousand injured, and thousands remain under the rubble in Gaza. Each day, Palestinians struggle to survive. Nearly 1.9 million people have been forcibly displaced across the Strip, multiple times. 11 months on, 101 Israeli hostages are still held to be in Gaza. While the actual number is likely higher, almost 10,000 Palestinians are held in Israeli prisons or ad hoc military facilities, many arbitrarily, with over 50 people having died due to inhumane conditions and ill treatment. In the West Bank, deadly and destructive operations, some at a scale not witnessed in the last 2 decades, are worsening a calamitous situation there, already aggravated by serious settler violence.
We can bring you now the reports of the gunman opening fire on Israelis in the West Bank, killing all 3 of them. The gunman was said to have come through the Allen Bridge crossing from the Jordanian side in a truck when he came down and opened fire. Multiple ambulances arrived at the scene of the attack near the Allenby Bridge border crossing with Jordan. Security forces had shot the gunman dead by this time. The Israeli military said a terrorist approached the area of the bridge in a truck, exited the truck, and opened fire at the Israeli security forces operating at the bridge. It was the first attack of its kind along the border with Jordan since the October 7 attack last year, when Palestinian Islamist group Hamas carried out an assault in southern Israel, sparking the war in Gaza. The attack took place in a commercial cargo area under Israeli control, where Jordanian trucks offload cargo entering the occupied West Bank. The crossing, also known as the King Hussein Bridge, lies about midway between Amman and Jerusalem, just north of the Dead Sea. Jordanian authorities have been on high alert since the incident. Police have been checking vehicles some 250 meters from the bridge. Service cars used to transport people from the bridge to Amman were parked along the road following the blockade of the crossing, after Israel closed all of its land border crossings with Jordan. The Jordanian Ministry of Interior announced an investigation into the shooting is underway. In the meantime, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu told cabinet on Sunday it was a difficult day and strongly condemned the killing of the 3 civilians. He described the incident as a loathsome terrorist murder. Hamas, on the other hand, has praised the attack. The group's senior spokesman, Sami Abu Zuri, referring to it as a response to Israel's offensive in Gaza, saying the group expects many more similar actions. Let's bring in the VOA's Linda Gradstein. She's in Jerusalem. Linda, great to see you, as always. We're beginning to see, more of these microaggressions towards Israel, blatantly than before. A gunman opening fire on civilians on the border with Jordan that happened on Sunday. It was unprovoked, I want to believe. What do we know about the gunman at this point?
The gunman was a Jordanian taxi driver, a truck driver, and he actually got through the first level of security. He had hidden the handgun somewhere in the truck. And so there was, first of all, a failure. Why did the Jordanians on their side catch him before he got to where there were Israelis working? And he then, as you said, jumped down from the truck and opened fire with a handgun. He apparently, according to Israeli officials, acted alone. It was not organized by Hamas or by Palestinian Islamic Jihad, although they both welcomed the killing. What I think disturbed Israelis were scenes in Jordan, which actually has a peace treaty with Israel, of hundreds of people dancing and setting off firecrackers and celebrating, handing out sweets. And it showed the depth to which the Arab public is, so against Israel because of the almost year-long war in Gaza. So Israel has a very long border with this is the border between the West Bank and Jordan. It's the only land crossing into the West Bank. And Israel reopened the border for pedestrians, but not to vehicle traffic today. But there is concern because that border is more than 200 miles long, and some of it is fenced off, but some of it's actually, you could just walk across the border if you wanted to. Israel has a peace treaty with Jordan. The Jordanian government did condemn the attack, but the condemnation came after only 14 hours, and Israel felt that it was not as strong a condemnation as they would have liked to have heard.
Yes, and the reason why the gunman was able to get past any security with his gun is because, of the porosity, you said, of the border. The Jordanian authorities, you said, did give their apology a bit late, 14 hours, but they also announced that they were opening an investigation into the attack. Can they be considered an ally of Israel in the Middle East?
Well, first of all, as you know, Israel and Jordan have had a peace treaty going back to 1994. And the fact is that the Jordanian security services has worked very closely with the Israeli security services to, foil attacks, to stop attacks like this, and has basically been very successful. And Israeli security officials have told me that close relationship with Jordan is one of Israel's major strategic assets. And if we just think back a few months to April, when Iran launched hundreds of rockets and drones at Israel after Israel attacked the Iranian embassy in Syria. And so in that attack, Jordan helped shoot down some of those rockets and missiles along with Israel and the United States. So I would say that, yes, I think you could say that Jordan is an ally, but the Jordanian population, which is overwhelmingly Palestinian, is very angry at Israel because of the war in Gaza.
Almost every country seems to have a problem with Israel and this war in Gaza. They tend to view Israel as being colonial in its approach to the Palestinians. So one of the reasons why they say the Palestinians do not have a nation of their own. But to this morning, the attacks in Syria, when the Israeli airstrikes reportedly killed 16 people. I know forces have said that there are anti-Israeli elements in Syria, but what the IDF is not willing to confirm is if it did carry out this attack. So is it safe to assume that they did target these elements in Syria?
Well, it certainly seems likely, and the fact that Israel isn't taking credit for it perhaps is to prevent an Iranian response. Apparently, what was attacked was some type of munitions factory or chemical weapons factory that's being run by Iran, and that many of those who were killed were actually Iranians in Syria. Israel has attacked similar places in Syria hundreds of times, but very often chooses not to take responsibility, kind of not to throw it in people's faces and say, we did this, and then forcing a response. So, it comes amid growing tensions on various fronts. The Gaza war has been going on for almost a year now with a very high death toll of some 40,000, which includes both gunmen and civilians. There are tensions, growing tensions between Israel and Hezbollah, and there were fears that there could be a wider regional war that could actually involve other parties as well. And when Israel and Hamas seemed to be moving towards a ceasefire, even just a couple of weeks ago, the assumption was that that would also put an end to the war, it's basically a war already with Hezbollah. In fact, today, by the way, a Hezbollah drone hit a residential building in the northern city of Nahariya, which has not been evacuated, and another drone was shot down over a school that had hundreds of kids in it at the time. So there are a lot of tensions on the northern border. There are tensions between Israel and Iran, Yemen with the Houthis. So I think that the situation does remain very sort of precarious. So Israel doesn't want to take responsibility for this attack in Syria, although it certainly seems to be that it was responsible.
I just want to point out, the way the war has been going. So the Israeli forces, the IDF, has been targeting Hamas militants as well as other militants who are against Israel. And for all of the attacks, the missiles, the drones, they have been targeting where these militants are hiding. But the militants have been targeting defenseless civilians in Israel, and that is quite unacceptable. Does Israel worry about why the international community is not condemning, these groups and their actions against Israel?
Sure. I mean, they're definitely concerned, but they just feel that the international community basically they're very frustrated. They feel that it's turned against Israel. They say that it's Hamas that started this conflict, that Hamas is, hiding in among civilians. And so, putting those civilians at risk. In fact, just last week, the 6 hostages were executed by Hamas as Israeli soldiers approached the tunnel that they were being held in Gaza. One of those 6 was an American Israeli, Hirsch Goldberg Poland. His parents are friends of mine. And I think that the entrance to that tunnel was like from a child's bedroom. So it's a very difficult situation. Now, I don't think it means that everybody in Gaza supports Hamas. It's very difficult to say no to Hamas. But I think there is a sense in Israel that they would like to see the international community condemning Hamas more and not condemning Israel. At the same time, many in the international community say there's also a question of proportionality. The fact that 40,000 Palestinians have been killed and close to 100,000 wounded, and as you said in the report, close to 2 million forced to leave their homes, large parts of Gaza destroyed. So then some, question whether Israel's response has been proportional and if Israel could have handled this a little bit differently.
Yes, and does it justify Israel's ongoing offensive against these militant groups in different countries in Jordan, in Syria, in Lebanon? Does it justify Israel going after militants in these countries?
Well, I think, the issue is not really going after militants. I think the issue is more civilians. And in a place like Gaza that is so densely populated, it's almost impossible to distinguish between militants and civilians. In Lebanon, Israel has tried very hard to only hit Hezbollah and has been relatively successful. That said, tens of thousands of South Lebanese have been forced to leave their homes, just as tens of thousands of Israelis have been forced to leave their homes on the northern border. In Israel and in Lebanon, it's not clear when they're going to be able to come back. So I think that Israel believes that, according to international law, they are within their rights to attack militants and to attack people who are planning to attack Israel. The question is, especially in Gaza, it's almost impossible not to have civilians be collateral damage. That said, apparently there have been fewer civilians killed in this conflict in proportion to the number of gunmen killed than in any other conflict, including the United States and Afghanistan.
Indeed, inevitable to kill those civilians. Unfortunately, lives have been lost in this war, and we do pray for comfort for the families who are left behind to mourn them. Linda, thanks again for speaking with us.
Sure. Thank you.